Isaac Nader just pulled off one of the biggest upsets in 1500 meter history. But the race itself, it was honestly one of the strangest and unluckiest 1500 meter finals I have ever seen. And today, we are going to be breaking down the race, analysing everyone's tactics, and understanding what went wrong for the big players. I will also be giving my thoughts on why Niels Laros failed to deliver in this event after such a strong season. I think those Diamond League races were a big problem for him, but not for the reason you might think. Now, going into this race, we had some massive dropouts before the final. Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Faneuil Koech crashed out in the heats. Azadine Habs, Cameron Myers and Ethan Strand all failed to make the final due to a mixture of poor tactics and a lack of fitness. And of course, the Olympic champion was controversially disqualified for jostling in the semi-final. Therefore, this race was open for anyone to take the victory, but you still had two key favourites in Josh Kerr and Niels Laros. With no real frontrunners, however, the race started off slow. Kerr immediately darted to the inside and back of the pack, whilst Laros actually found himself leading the pack. This was immediately very interesting to me, as Laros normally likes to stay in the middle of the pack and then move up the field in the last couple of laps. I was very curious to see how he'd handle leading from the front, because it's not something he's very used to. They went through 800 meters in barely under 2 minutes, but this was where the race began to heat up. Timothy Chariot had just taken the lead and began pushing the pace. Kerr was still boxed in at the back, and it was starting to become clear that something was up. It's fine if you want to stay out of trouble for the first few hundred meters and avoid a fall, especially in a 14-man field, but this is the point where you'd start to want to move up and make sure you don't give yourself too much work to do when the final lap comes. This decision by Kerr was made more strange by the fact that he normally likes to shadow the leader very closely, even in super tactical races. Something was clearly wrong. With 600 meters to go, the Brit pulls up and starts limping badly. He tries to continue, but his race is over. Back at the front, they take the bell with Chariot leading. Laros is on his shoulder, but Jake Wightman moves up closely. He passes Laros, who does not seem able to overtake Chariot. It's shades of 2022. Jake tries to open up a gap on the field, and Laros does not seem to have any response. But out of nowhere, Reynald Chariot and Isaac Nader charge down the outside, with Nader going all the way to outdip Wightman and take the win. And I think his reaction says it all. I didn't expect that. You didn't expect that. No, you didn't. Stop lying. Okay, maybe this guy expected it, but even he didn't expect a gold medal performance. Very well done to Nader, but I can't help as a Brit feel gutted for Jake Wightman. It would have been such an amazing story if he came back from injury hell to win the 2025 World Champs. And just like Kajelcha, he was so close. He was so close. That said, a silver medal is a great result for him, but I'm sure there's always that what if factor playing in his mind. Just a quick background on who exactly Isaac Nader is. He is a Portuguese athlete and has been a solid contender on the world stage for some time now. He has a PB of 329.37 and great 800 meter speed, but until today, his best performance was a 348 Diamond League win in the Oslo Mile and a bronze medal in the European Indoor Champs 1500 meter. I expected him to make the final, but nothing more. For almost the entire race, he stayed in the middle of the pack, mostly out of trouble, but arguably a little boxed in come the last 200 meters. He had to swing wide in the home straight, but just had a little extra juice compared to everyone else. It was great running from him. Now, I've seen a lot of people criticize the tactics of the other runners, but I honestly don't think anyone ran this race particularly badly. Wightman has great finishing speed and made his move early after sensing Laros, who normally puts pressure in the last 200 meters, was not overtaking Chariot. He staked his claim, but just didn't have the legs for it. I don't see him going earlier really changing that. Yes, you can argue that it's silly for the athletes to bet on their kick, but the favourites of the field arguably had the strongest finishing speed anyway, so it makes sense for them to do so. No one pushing the pace was really going to receive any benefit from it, except likely getting kicked on. It's what happened to Chariot in this race. For me, the main problem that all the big players had going into this race was a perfect storm of injuries, missed time peaks, and just plain bad luck. Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr were both compromised going into this event. Obviously, Jakob's problems are well documented, but Kerr clearly was hiding a problem going into the champs. His semi-final was the first warning sign, because he just did not seem to have much left in the tank, despite the race being relatively slow. You can tell it was bugging him early on as well. He was likely hiding from the field a little bit by tucking into the back of the pack. His running style also looked a little unbalanced in hindsight, and he was grimacing a little in lap 2. Kerr has been dealing with injuries earlier on in the season, so it's possible that these were flaring up again. Of course, he ran Grand Slam track early on, which can't have helped with his recovery, and his London performance wasn't exactly stellar either. On top of injuries, you also just had plain bad luck. Faneuil Koech fell in the heats, Cole Hocker was DQ'd, but for me, the long season and missed time peaks played arguably the biggest factor. Jonah Koech and Ethan Strand, both so strong in the USA trials, had little to offer in this event. Koech was additionally dealing with hamstring issues during the season. Of course, Yaron Naguse fried himself with too much racing in the season and didn't even qualify for Tokyo. People are blaming Grand Slam track for this, as the busy race schedule incentivized athletes to overcook a season that they should have been taken extra easy given its length. And sure, GST didn't help. Two main players, Kerr and Naguse, were clearly compromised by it, but athletes should know when to peak and what their bodies can handle. It's becoming very popular to criticize GST, and for good reason. The fact they haven't paid their athletes is criminal, especially given the toll it's taken on them in the later season. But the company going broke wouldn't fix these athletes' bodies or make them time their peak better. And it's not like everyone in GST looked terrible. As for Niels Laros, it seems like a mystery given how excellent he looks prior to the race. Some people have suggested that he was over-raced before Tokyo. However, I'm not so sure. If he had been overcooked, we would expect him to look flat in the heats and semi-final, which he didn't. He actually won his semi looking very comfortable. We would also expect him to give slightly underwhelming performances in his last race, but he kept on looking better and better in Brussels and Zurich. What's more, he has won every race he ran since the pre-classic comfortably, with a massive last sprint, which shows he had plenty left in the tank. I know the Dutchman has a bad injury and illness history, but he looked like he was firing on all cylinders going into the final. If I'm honest, I think the real reason is the pressure just got to him. The biggest problem in running those Diamond League races wasn't that it over-fatigued him before Tokyo, it's that he was so good it put all the pressure on him before the race and made him the favourite going into the final. It was his race to lose in many people's eyes. You can see he looked incredibly tense and was breathing very heavily on the start line. When the race began, he was also looking around kind of frantically when he realised that he was leading from the front. I think he was expecting someone else to take the lead and may have panicked a little when no one did, because it meant things were not going to his usual comfort zone. Laros operates best when he hunts others down. It's a much nicer feeling to finish strong out-kicking your opponent than leading from the front and becoming the hunted yourself. And it's easier to feel like all eyes are on you when you're leading the pack. When you add an extra unknown factor like that in a race where you're already incredibly nervous, it can really mess with your system. He tightened up badly in the last 200 meters, which I think is largely due to nerves. Physically, he has the speed to more than hang with his competitors in a 3:34 race. But that's not important if your muscles are tensing up in the final. A similar thing happened with 16-year-old 800 meter phenom Cooper Lukenhaus. Amazing talent, all eyes on him, and he cracked under the pressure by running a kg race entirely in lanes 2 and 3 to be knocked out in the heats. Having to travel across the world won't have helped him either. It doesn't matter if you've run 142 or a 329 in second gear, if you have a young athlete who's not used to dealing with immense pressure, they're going to crack. Honestly, I think this was a pretty anticlimactic race. All of the big players were compromised in some way or other, but hats off to Nader for running an excellent final. He beat everyone in front of him and is the deserving champion, even if I really wanted Wightman to win. Click here for my thoughts on whether the disqualification of the Olympic champion in the semi-finals was justified. Let me know your thoughts about this race in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.